is being recorded.
Okay, so Matt Stamp here with What Does It Take to Be a Tai Chi Fighter? I'm here with Robert Ruby. He is a heavyweight champion. He's won the heavyweight or superweight, infinite weight of the Late Tai up in the championships in Baltimore. And he is a Wu stylist, a disciple of Dr. Li Qun, and he's been to China, and we're going to talk a lot about his adventures um, and his background. And so, Robert, what does it take to be a Tai Chi fighter?
That's a big question, man.
Mm.
I think, one of the main things that I think about a lot, and this is just my views, of course, are, people who practice Tai Chi and go into use it in fighting generally have background in some other martial art. And when they find a issue where Tai Chi maybe is not working, they switch and then they're just doing kickboxing or they're just doing karate or Muay Thai or something like that. They actually don't stick to the principles of Tai Chi and the techniques of Tai Chi. And
Right.
I'm a big believer in, sticking with something to make it work because
Uh-huh.
that's what's going to intrinsically make it much more deep rooted in your system if you have to rely on that alone. Because it's very easy if you do other martial arts to switch and change, I think, in between styles um, when things get tough.
Right.
um, I think
Now
that
you,
good.
mhm. Now you told me you did have a background before you did Wu Tai Chi,
Yeah,
and you were doing Guangping Tai Chi with Dr. Jonathan Shear,
yeah,
someone we both know very well. But you
mhm.
also have a background in other martial arts. Do you want to talk about
Yeah. I
that?
started doing martial arts when I was 9,
Mhm.
and I started with just some basic kickboxing stuff. A guy in my neighborhood um, had a heavy bag, and he did karate for years. So I started with that. Then I did some Vietnamese kung fu. Um, and then I did some Ishinru karate. And then in high school, I found Ishinru karate again and started that. And I wrestled all through high school. Played football, did that whole thing. And then after high school, started in college, and I got connected with Sifu Tyrone Staten and started doing Hungar kung fu for a while. And then after that, I got
And that was in
into
Richmond, right? Out in like
yeah,
the
that was in
Midlothian
Richmond. Yeah.
area.
Mhm, mhm.
I remember that school because
Yeah.
I went to Parks Bakwa School, which is
Yeah,
not
yeah,
too
and
far from there.
uh-huh,
Yeah.
and I was really interested in parks, going to parks, but, I found out that, you actually didn't get a lot of practice with park, and that was one
Yeah.
of the things that kinda turned me off a little bit, you
Hmm.
know? So then I did some Sway Jiao, I've done judo, um, some, Goju-Ryu for a little bit, and then I found Tai Chi. It was one of those things where I saw John outside. You know where his house is, and there's a church right
Yeah.
beside it. And he's always outside
Mhm.
practicing. And I drove by several times and saw him. And I thought he was a little Asian man because he always has a little snap cap pulled down. So you really couldn't see his face, and he had a little goatee. You know, and so one day I just stopped and started talking to him, and he said, "Yeah, come on down to University of Richmond and come practice." And
Mhm.
so I went down and tried, and then I was in really good shape. I was very strong. I was leg pressing close to 1,000 pounds for reps at that point because I was working out all the time.
Mhm.
And I went and did the first class with him for an hour, and he taught me the first three moves of Guangping, and it was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. I mean, it was tragically difficult to where, my legs cramped up and I fell down twice. And, it was like, why is this so hard? I don't understand. And in my mind, I couldn't rationalize the difficulty of it because the other styles I've done before, holding a horse stance, things like that, it was completely different. But the idea of, learning how to relax your body and moving slowly and carrying your weight over balanced positions, that's where the difficulty lies because I think Tai Chi in a lot of ways kind of goes against what your body's natural tendencies are because we have these uh, things we learn over the years of our lives and movement, and it seems to go backwards against what we think is the right thing. Like, oh, that
Mhm.
can't be strong, and it's very strong. principle,
Right.
you know.
Like Tai Chi is a daily decrease of strength of and more relaxation, or the
Yeah,
tendons to relax, the muscles to relax, but still having that pliable strength and
and that's what's
coming from that.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it seems like the more relaxed you are, the stronger it is,
Mhm.
because it allows you to have that very fast reaction. You know, it's that old saying is, you know, smooth is slow, or slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. You know, that kind of thing.
Uh,
And I think that's a, you know, that was one of the things I had to learn for years. And then of course, Pat and John had met in Dr. Lee probably 2 years before I met John, and
okay.
he told me about Dr. Lee, and I
Mhm.
was just amazed. I was like, "Oh, is that real? You know, can he really do that kind of, push hands and stuff?"
Mhm.
And yeah, he was the real deal. I met him, and immediately, I knew, this was it.
Mhm.
Because not only was the fact that Wu Style was such a complete Tai Chi system, it's got all the weapons and the forms and the different types of push hands, and I was just amazed in the depth of quality of what it had to offer. And
Now, what made you decide to do the Lei Tai fighting? Did you have some experience before with like karate tournaments or any other
yeah, yeah,
tournaments,
I
or?
did a lot of tournaments in karate and judo and um, kung fu stuff that was like really local tournaments, that kind of thing. And
Mhm.
so, we always in karate, we always fought and sparred. And it was never point sparring. It was always, medium to heavy contact. And
Mhm.
so we saw the lead tie, and I was like, "Oh, I'd like to go try that." Me and my buddy David Kennedy at the time were like,
Mhm.
"Yeah." And he's another martial artist, and he um, was doing Tai Chi at the time too with John. To try the lead tie. And so, we were all gung ho for it, and we signed up and did the medical releases and did all that stuff. This was
Uh-huh.
probably maybe January, so it was like 6, 7 months out from the tournament. We were like, we got
Uh-huh.
plenty of time to get ourselves ready. And of course, you know how life likes to throw you curveballs, and life gets in the way of life sometimes.
Uh-huh.
So, for the first 4 or 5 months, I just was backed up with work, and I had no time, and our practices were sporadic at best. And so,
Mhm.
it was like a month before the tournament. We were like, man, we've got to do this. We can't back out now. We've already paid for everything, and we've already
Uh-huh.
told everybody we're going to do it. And so, yeah, we just knuckled down for that month, man, and just hammered it. And
Nice.
uh,
And I
it was,
saw it. I saw the fighting. I was like, I
yeah,
think, did you beat a guy by, I think you took advantage of that rule where if you push him off the platform 3 times, you kind of like automatically win. Did you do that,
uh,
or were you knocking guys out? I vaguely remember your fights, but I did see them.
yeah. I didn't. I think I may have pushed him off once, but I think it was just by points.
Hmm.
Um, it was very interesting. It's that whole idea of, of course, they hype it up big time because it was, the nighttime Li Tai fight. So it was like all the
Yeah.
lights and everybody was there to watch. And of course, you
Uh-huh.
get caught up in that whole uh, grandeur of it all, and it makes you a little bit anxious.
Hmm.
So I wasn't expecting to be that anxious during the fight. We went out there and we started, and uh, he hit me a couple times, and immediately I just everything went out the window, and I just started wailing. And it was, I did everything I could to keep myself calm as possible. But
There you go.
it was a difficult, because um, most of the tournaments and stuff I did was never, it was usually in the gym, and it was like 10 different things happened at one time, and so people were halfway paying attention, and you really focused just on you and what was going on. So it was so much going on that it kind of threw me off a little bit. But yeah, in the end of it, um, I came out on top, and it was a great experience, you know. And I knew instantly that, the idea of using what you say you do, I think is important, you know,
Hmm.
because, of course, there's so much going on now with, the mixed martial arts challenging Tai Chi guys who say they're masters and they're getting
Hmm.
beat and stuff. And I just think they haven't met the right person yet. A lot of
Yeah.
these older guys, who, practice Tai Chi, and then you come in contact with a lot of um, high level Tai Chi people who you get under this disillusion of the master student kind of persona, where the master pushes you and you just jump back, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And a lot of people fall into that respect. It's a respectful position to be in, because you don't want your teacher to look bad. You don't want uh, God forbid, push him down or hurt him in front of anybody, because they would lose a lot of face doing that.
Yeah.
So I'm a big, proponent of, the only way to know is to show, right? So, we went to a tournament in in Beijing. I think it was 2000, and it was the was it a 100-year anniversary tournament, something like that. It's a very large tournament. There were 1,000 competitors at the tournament, and we were traveling all over China and stuff at the time, and that's one of the times where we were doing a demonstration. This very small town called Longfong. One of his disciples had invited him to come by, and there was a very small kung fu tournament. They wanted to do a demonstration, and so he of course wanted to do push hands, because I was a lot bigger than him, and he could really push me. I mean, that was the thing about Dr. Lee. He was only like 150 pounds,
Right.
and I was
And you're like
300.
300 pounds.
Yeah, and so he would really push me.
Uh-huh.
And so we were doing this demonstration, and I tried to give him a little bit. I just wanted to, I'd been pushing with him for years, but
Uh-huh.
I just tried, give him a little bit of push and see what happened. And I pushed him, and he turned and spun me and pushed me, and I was, I was urinating blood for a couple of days after that.
Mm.
And he got so mad because I didn't tell him about it, because he's of course a
Oh.
doctor, and so he got very mad. He said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And so
Uh.
I was like, "Oh, I didn't want to bother you. I didn't want to worry you or anything like that." And I was like, "Whoa, he's got a little juice."
And then you guys got to do demonstrations in Yongyan County.
Yeah,
I guess like you did some Guangping and some Wu style fast form.
yeah. Fast form, spear, broadsword, and then the slow form
Hmm.
or simple form. So it
I
was,
have some pictures of some of the. I don't have the pictures of the demos with you, but I found this picture of Dr.
yeah,
Lely with Pat and Bruce.
yeah,
This is from somewhere up in Baltimore, I think Townsend, and
yeah,
there's that one. That's when we met up, and I was having some dinner with you guys, and
yeah,
then so I have, and then let me do a screen share because this
sure.
is going to be great. Let me do my screen share.
And I've
I
got a
want to
video
show
too I
you.
can send you of Dr. Lee doing some push hand stuff.
I don't have it. It's not showing. Let me close that and go to here. It's some pictures from some magazines, and I was looking for this one magazine and couldn't find it. Of it shows you and Jonathan and Young Yin and Dr. Li Li.
Hmm.
Okay, let's go back to here. I think I have it now. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, so there's a nice picture of Dr. Li Li for the
Yeah.
viewers.
Hmm.
Now here's a picture of him tossing you push hands with a 300-pound student. And then there's some spear stuff. I remember
Yeah,
watching a lot of the spears.
these were we were doing pictures for one of his books.
Nice. And there's
Hmm.
a good picture of you there with some medals. Now you have a lot of push hand championship
Yeah.
winnings. I want to say like maybe five or six, because you kept, even though you weren't doing lei tai, you would do the push hand competitions
Hmm.
at some various tournaments. So that's
Yeah,
a
that
good
was,
picture there.
we started with Dr. Lee. It was amazing because it was a really intensive training thing, because he would come to the US and he was only here for a month or two.
Hmm.
And so in that month, of course, his big push was the Qigong, because him being a traditional Chinese medical doctor, that was one of his foremost things.
Hmm.
Dr. Lee was always a proponent of, Tai Chi is for health first, fighting second, that kind of thing. And
Right.
so we would always have every week, we'd have practice 5 days a week. We'd have practice, and it would always be qigong, push hands, and a form of some sort. So it was a very intensive process. And when the first year that I was training with Dr. Lee, it was too much. I was overwhelmed because there was so much new information coming in,
Mhm.
um, that I had to
And they
quit
were
my
very
job.
open.
Oh,
He was
absolutely.
very open.
Oh, he
So
opened the door for
yeah.
everything. I mean,
Oh yeah.
he didn't hold anything back like a lot of teachers do.
Hmm.
I remember being in a tournament one time, and there were some people behind us talking about Tai Chi spear. And the girl was like, "Oh yeah, eventually we're going to get to the point where teacher will teach us spear. After 8 or 10 years of practice, we'll learn." And I was like, myself, I was like, "Man, we just learned spear last year, and it's the second year." you know. And
Uh-huh.
so he was very good. This whole
So
thing
yeah.
was
Uh-huh.
spreading the knowledge.
Uh-huh.
That was our job as a student. And of course, when you become a disciple, that's your main thing, is to try to spread what you learn as much as possible to as many
Hmm.
people as possible. You know.
Yeah, so we went to China with Coach Ho Wei Chi,
Mhm.
1996, and we were at the Shanghai Olympic Hotel, and there's a big Olympic stadium right there where tons of people doing Tai Chi and Qigong, and I was with Dr. Shear, and we were just walking out there, and we met Dr. Li, and they were open to show us the fast form. They were
Yeah,
open to do different styles of push hands, like the different changes and
yeah,
everything, and I was pushing hands with some of his people and learning the forms, and it's kind of funny because we were there with Coach Wei Chi, who
yeah,
was Yang style, but here we are in the park. This guy's like showing us the stuff, and we're like, "Wow, I didn't know there was a fast form and all this kind of
yeah.
thing." So yeah.
And that was one of the things, was great. Dr. Lee pretty much brought, well, he was one of the main people who brought the fast form to the U.S. At one point. And I know he was probably one of the first people to do spear, Wu style spear here. And this was in Winchester. I don't know if you went to the Winchester tournaments, but that
Yep.
was like one of the best Tai Chi venues I think there's been.
A Taste of China is like, yeah, I've been there
Oh,
a dozen times.
super high level, always super
Hmm.
high level people there, and it was
Hmm.
amazing. The
Yeah.
quality of Tai Chi and internal martial arts that were there
Hmm.
at that time. But yeah, Dr. Lee, his we started doing push hands and stuff. Uh, like I said, it got so overwhelming that I had to quit my job. I worked myself, and I was like, I can't work for the next 3 months while he's here because there's no way I can possibly work and learn this. And so at that point, I was coming at 6 o'clock in the morning and doing a morning practice with him. And then I would practice literally the whole day till our evening practice at 5:30. And then we'd practice from 5 to 7:30. And then we'd go get dinner. And so it was like, a full-time job, when he was here. And I think that was one
Right.
of the things how I, not toot my own horn, but I excelled very fast because of the process of, that heavy training over that time.
Mhm.
My life was Tai Chi 24/7. And there were times, going home, it was difficult to walk up the 3 steps to get in my house because it's so, practicing. And, of course, Wu style focuses on parallel foot placement. That's
Mhm.
one of the main things of Wu style. And
Right.
so, training my body to turn my knees in, relax the quad, and let your hips fold in. You know, eventually, it was very difficult at first because I've always felt stress in my knees and my hips, and then eventually, it became very easy. But of course, coming from something and trying to redirect your body into a new uh, positioning was very difficult at the beginning for sure. And I think even a lot of Wu style today, a lot of people, have a tendency because Yang style is such a strong form, and of course, Wu came from the Yang style, and so there are some Wu style
Right.
people who still have a back foot that's turned out that actually is not parallel. And of course,
And that's what I want to circle back on. And I'm going
mhm,
to share you an article that recently came out by Grandmaster Ma Yu Liang.
mhm,
And so People don't know, Dr. Li Qun was a disciple of Grandmaster Ma Yu Liang, and Ma Yu Liang um, wrote something talking about how when Yang Luchan was teaching in Beijing, he had three main students, and one of them was Wu Kuan Yu. And Wu
Hmm.
Kuan Yu is the only one that kind of his style survived.
Yeah.
And so um, Ma Yu Liang was saying that the Wu style fast form in particular, comes from Yang Luchan and Yang Banhao when he was teaching in Beijing.
Right.
And so that was one of the interests for me because coming being a Yang stylist, I'm always trying to retro engineer and go back in history
Yeah.
and trying to find more things. So we know that the Wu style is kind of like a small frame Yang style, and
Hmm.
but it has its own. It kind of went its own direction, and so
Right.
originally we called Tai Chi just Tai Chi, but then they
Hmm.
start saying, okay, this is the Yang's Tai Chi, this is the Wu's Tai Chi,
Yeah. When all
but
the families separated.
yeah, and
Hmm.
so yeah, I really appreciate that Dr. Li was saying, okay, Mom, Master Ma says this comes from the what Yang Li Chan and Yang Ben Ho were doing.
Yeah. And so it's interesting. The fast form, of course, was the first form, and then
Mhm,
from the fast form came the long form, and from the long form came the simple form. And I guess during Wu Jinchuan's travels, of course, there was a Beijing style, a Shanghai style, and a Hong Kong style. And in Hong Kong, they do what's called the box and style and smooth form.
mhm,
So the box style is basically uh, very robotic. 1, 2, 3, kind of cadenced each posture as it
mhm.
transitions, and then the smooth form is just basically the same thing, just with no stopping. But they don't have the complete system in Hong Kong. They don't do spear usually. They don't have the simple form. They only have the long form. So they don't do the fast form. And I think they do the two gin forms and maybe the saber, but they don't do the double saber or the double gin. So,
And then there's the Beijing up there,
mhm,
based on like a Yu Yu Ting or something like that.
mhm, and that's very long and drawn out stepping.
Hmm.
And it's there are you can look at it and go, oh, that looks like Wu style,
Hmm.
but it's just different. You know,
The Wang Peichen
yeah, one patient
kind
style,
of
yeah.
style. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now I
But I
think
think they,
Odessa Brooks, who used to teach Wu style in Richmond, I think she came from that one because she taught a 37 Wu style form
yeah, yeah.
that was almost the same as Wei Peixian's book.
Hmm.
Um, I went to her school for a short time just to investigate the small style Wu,
Yeah.
but this was before Dr. Li came.
Hmm.
I want to circle back on Dr. Jonathan Shear because he was
Yeah.
my professor at VCU.
Yeah.
He taught Eastern philosophy, and he was a student under Coach Hui Chi. He showed me a lot of the Guangping stuff, the difference between what the Yang style that Wei Chi was teaching, which came from Fu Jianwen, and he was showing me,
Hmm.
okay, so this is how we do the cloud hands, or this is how
Hmm.
we do the brush knee.
Yeah.
Um, and he was also a TM teacher. Now, Dr. Shear was a student of Hua
Coolin Ying,
Huling in
yeah,
San
direct student.
Francisco,
Hmm.
and he was actually roommates with Marilyn Cooper too,
Yep. Hmm.
who also is a big Guangping person.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, Now, when you did your fighting, were you more doing I guess you were doing more Wu style at the time, right?
Yeah, more Wu style at the time. What's very interesting is when Dr. Lee came and we demonstrated Guangping for him, he was like,
Mm-hmm,
"Oh, very similar to Wu style." And
mm-hmm,
what he meant by that was the internal coiling of Wu style. Guangping has the same internal coiling, where there is a uh, position where the hips are locked in a position and the waist turns through it as though you're corkscrewing your energy down into the ground. And so this is one
interesting.
of the uh, proponents of Shanghai Wu style for sure is that there's a definite separation of hips and waist. And what it's very interesting that there's a natural turn where the body can, if the hips are locked in positions like sitting in a chair and you turn your waist to 45 degrees, there's a natural stopping point where your body, where there's no strain, I would say.
Mhm,
There's a
mhm.
feeling of stretch, but no strain. And so the 45-degree turn in that uses the same power principles as the Guang Ping. And, when we became disciples, Dr. Lee, of course, always said to us, you know, don't stop practicing the Guangping because the Guangping is history. It has to be maintained, even though, most time you become a disciple of something, you give everything else up and you practice just that style. And so he was a big proponent of, things keeping alive for historical value for sure.
Preserving the history and
Yeah,
everything because the Guangping is apparently traces to Yang Ho as well.
correct. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Um, so when you were doing prepping for your fight,
Mhm.
what was the main things you were doing? Were you doing any weightlifting, or were you doing cardio, or were you just sparring the whole
So the
time?
cardio that we were doing, I'm a big believer in, your cardio should be what you're going to be doing with it.
Uh-huh.
So it was a lot of bag work,
Hmm.
just hitting the bag, going, getting to the point where you could do, up to, 3, 4, 5 minute rounds
Hmm.
and not just, tap the bag, but really, working it. Uh, I think, the running aspect is good. And, for years when I did karate, and I would do personal training for people, I did American freestyle for years. And we'd have a lot of guys that come in that could run marathons, but they couldn't, punch and kick the pads for 10 minutes. And I remember
Right.
one guy was, multi-marathon runner, and he'd get so gassed and winded he'd have to go in the bathroom and puke, you know. And we always thought that was funny, but it's a different type of cardio,
Hmm.
especially when you're hitting something, getting that shock back into your body. You know, it's a different practice altogether. So, our main thing was bag work and then sparring. And when we sparred, it was me and Dave were always sparring each other, and we'd have other people come in that would want to work out some too, but it was mainly just me and him, and we would go pretty hard. I think that's one of the important things uh, that it can't be. If you're going in to fight full contact, you need to practice full contact.
Hmm.
You can't go and just do point sparring because I got you, I hit you. That's my point. Doesn't work like that. When
Yeah.
you're fighting full contact, they don't stop it unless you're knocked out, knocked off the ring, or knocked to the ground, right?
Mhm.
And so that's it's a big difference of practice, and you need to learn how to practice that way. I think it's very important.
What are you doing these days, and what would you tell people, the viewers, if they want to go into, at least push hands competitions or
Yeah.
fighting competitions? What advice would you give them?
So nowadays, I just moved to a very rural area of Virginia, so there's not much out here for me as far as practice or teaching.
Mhm,
But what I'm going to do is eventually, when my schedule evens out more, I want to get another class started in Richmond at least once a week. Just
mhm,
teach. I may try a class here just to see. I'm very close to Longwood, so I may get in touch with Longwood College and maybe start a program there. But when I was teaching, I taught at VCU for 5 years, and the problem with VCU teaching at a college is usually you never have the same students. And people that come to those classes aren't there to really learn Tai Chi. They're there for a credit or to sign off on one of their physical uh, standards that they need to have to mark off to
mhm,
graduate or whatever. And so you
mhm.
get people there who aren't really interested. And so you find yourself teaching a beginner intro class for 6 years. It's one of those things.
Wow.
But yeah, I think anybody who is going to do push hands. This is when I started push hands with Dr. Lee. Of course, Bruce Schaub.
Mhm,
Um, And when I saw Bruce doing Tai Chi, I said, I want to be like that. Because I always thought he
Mhm.
was a very good martial artist. He had very good skill. His forms looked great.
And
And
I
his
think he was a push hands champion too.
yeah, yeah, and he did a lot of
Mhm,
push hands. And so,
mhm.
when he was there practicing with Dr. Lee, I always wanted to practice with him. But of course, Dr. Lee saw that I was already strong enough. And if me and Bruce were practicing, it'd be a lot of muscle. So he had me practicing with the old ladies. And so for 3 years in classes with Dr. Lee, I always had to push hands with the little 98-pound women. And I couldn't see the benefit of that. I was like, this is just ridiculous. I feel like I'm gonna break them. And that was important. That was an important thing to learn because it really does escalate your level of sensitivity. And that
Mhm,
was one thing that Dr. Lee had in droves is his sensitivity, his listening skills were amazing. I always coined it as, you're going to go somewhere and he's already there waiting for you by the time you get there. He was
mhm,
always 15, 20 steps ahead of you,
mhm,
pushing hands. And so when I started doing push hands in terms, um, I always tried to stay as soft as possible. That was my whole thing because I know I could muscle people. That wasn't the idea because for me that was like cheating. It's very easy to, of course, like I said before, break out of that mold you set yourself in, uh, so you can advance in something when it starts to get tough and just change it. And so, I think the first three push hands competitions I did, I came in like third or fourth or something like that. And after that, I just started winning. Um, and I have to, credit it back to Dr. Lee's knowledge of making me practice with those little old ladies
mhm.
because, keeping it soft is one of the biggest things. And I think that's detrimental even for today. People, it's very funny how you can govern a Tai Chi uh, competition if you're working with somebody who's really muscly and you remain soft. It makes them to get soft. It stops them from being muscly. It's very interesting that way.
Mhm.
And I found that in a lot of competitions. Unless you just got, these guys are like bulls and they just want to push and wrestle through you, that kind of thing. But the idea of them doing that and you stay soft and they can't do anything, they go, wait a minute, this isn't working. I've got to change it and do something else, you know. And I think, like I said, I think the most important thing for me, people who want to do push hands, is practice it soft, execute it soft. And of course that was one of the big. I'm going to clarify this. When I started Tai Chi, the first thing I said was, "How hard can it be? It's for old people." And yourself, that's a ridiculous thing to think. But when you're coming from a very hard style background, Tai Chi looks that way.
Mhm,
And not only is it very difficult, it's the idea that I feel like Tai Chi is a martial art of 1,000 minds. And I say that because, you have to be mindful of everything. At first you're just thinking about how to step. And then eventually that fades to the background. And then, oh, how is the proper positioning of the form? And then you start to get into how is my breathing? And then getting into how do I move energy? How do I circulate this? And of course, then the mind pulls back but leaves little traces of it in certain areas so that those things can be governed, but you're not intent on it, you know. And I think that's one of the things about push hands is one of the tricking thing is when you're pushing hands and you put pressure on a certain area, most people their attention goes to that pressure point where you're pushing down on and allows you to move, manipulate, and do other things. Um, but yeah, I think practicing push hands for competition is again, I think sticking to what until it works.
mhm,
I think that's very important. As far as the full contact goes, um, I think it's very important to get your cardio from what you're going to be doing. If you're going to be fighting, then get on a bag and get to that point where you can fight 5-10 minute rounds because then you won't get gassed while you're fighting. Even though you're your adrenaline will get a lot higher
Mhm.
as you're doing competition, and that can have a deep effect on your cardio and your energy
Yes,
levels. You know, because
absolutely.
it's very easy to get that adrenaline going too high on that first round, and then you're done. It's like there's nothing left in the tank.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think getting to the point where you're doing your bag work and you're sparring, uh, and really, get with somebody that you can spar with, that you can actually do, medium to heavy contact with.
Mhm.
Because, learning to take a hit is just as important as being able to dish it out. Because you
That's
can
right.
be a great fighter and can punch with a lot of power and get hit one time and go, oh, what is that? And your whole system
Mhm.
gets rocked, you know?
Absolutely. I
you
want to
know,
give a quick shout out to
yeah,
our friends across the pond, Michael Acton and the
yes.
Woo style people out there,
Uh-huh.
because he's got a couple really nice videos of his demoing the Woo style fast form at like a karate studio and in the
Mhm.
park and in a church. And you said something the other day, what Dr. Lee said about the fast form. You remember what that was?
Um, All right, so the fast form is a combination of slow and fast fudging movements. It's not just a one speed form, and some people practice it at very, a one speed kind of a thing, where it's either
Mhm.
all fast or it's all fudging, and it's really not that point. It has this very slow, fast, slow, fast, slow, fast kind of a pulsing energy that you use when you do the fast form. Um, it's interesting, the fast form again was the original form, and it still has the jumping double kick and stuff in it, where the long form doesn't have that. They took that out and made it all, single step kicking at
That's
that
right.
point.
Mhm.
And when Dr. Lee taught the fast form, you know, and of course with anything you're learning something new, you have an idea of what you think you're doing, and then of course that totally gets switched around and spun on its head and go, oh, it's not like I thought at all. We did this tournament in Texas, and
Oh, I don't want to cut
the
you short, but we
yeah,
have
sorry,
less
go
than
ahead.
a minute
Okay,
left.
go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, so let's just wrap it up. We can do this
Yeah,
another time and do a
yeah,
part two.
yeah,
And I really appreciate you doing this interview. I want to thank you,
absolutely.
and we'll put this up and we'll do another one. And I want to come out and visit you too sometime. Okay?
Yeah, I'd love to get done and do some push hands, man. That'd be great.
Yeah, yeah, great.
Yeah,
All right, thank you again, and
absolutely.
we appreciate you, Robert. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
yeah, take care.
All right, take care.
Mm.